Right, it's time to start. Got high quality tonight. I really appreciate all of you. I'm going back to doing something that I'm going to see how y'all like this. Long time ago, we used to do Bible studies a different way than what we do them now. And it was an old method that was used for years. And then it's a question, and then it's an answer. And you read the answer. And you study like a complete book study, subject study. So I thought I'd just do one tonight and just see what y'all thought about it. I looked back in some of my files and pulled out one. I've always loved the book of Job. We're going to go ahead and have a prayer before we start, though, because that's something we need to do. Bobby, would you mind to start us with a prayer?
Would you bow with me? Our God in heaven, Lord, we come before you to give thanks for the day that you blessed us with, Lord, and the life that we have here on earth. We're so grateful for the opportunity to come here and to open the Word, and to study it, to find out more about it, Lord, to understand it in a better manner so that we can be better Christians as we continue this life here on earth. We're grateful, Lord, for each and every soul that is in attendance tonight, for those that are listening over the broadcast. And we pray, God, that you continue to be with each of us, that we may keep you close to us always, do thy will. And Lord, when we fall short of thy glory, we pray that we come to you with a proper repentant heart, that we know that you can forgive our sins, God. Continue to be with those that are sick. We ask, God, if it be your will, you restore their health to a better portion than what they have today. And for anyone who has lost loved ones, God, we pray for them that they may find comfort in the knowledge that you are there with them. Please be with the teachers in the back, with the small children. God, we ask that we never forget the wonderful sacrifice given on our behalf. We thank you for that. It's in your Son's holy name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Well, I thought I would do a little overview tonight of the book of Job. You know, one of the most impressive, well, to me, I guess it's just me, but welcome to all of our people that are viewing from afar. There are some that said they were going to watch it tonight on the internet, so welcome to all of them. But we're going to do this a little different. Y'all will be giving me the answers, you're reading the answers to me after I ask the question. And you turn over to the book of Job, because that's where we're going to be at tonight. And I'm going to ask the question, and then we're going to get the answer, and then we're going to talk a little bit about it. So now the first one that I'm going to ask is going to require 8 verses of Scripture. I'm going to go outside and let LaWayne read that, but this is my question. The question number 1, when you look at the book of Job, how does God describe the man Job? Now verses 1 through 8 is going to be your answer. And I want you to listen to what the answer of the description of Job is given in the Bible by God. Okay, read verses 1 through 8, LaWayne.
There was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job, and that the man was perfect and upright, and one that feared God and eschewed evil. And there was born unto him 7 sons and 7 daughters. His substance also was 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camel, 500 yoke of oxen, 500 she donkeys, and a very great household, so that this man was the greatest of all men on the earth, of the east, And his son went and fetched in the house every one his day, and sent and called for their 3 sisters to eat and to drink with them. And it was so that when the day of their feasting was done or gone, about the same, Job sent and sanctified them, and rose up early in the morning and offered burnt offerings according to the numbers of them all. For Job said, it may be that my sons have sinned, and cursed God in their heart. Thus did Job continually. And now this day was a day when the sons of God came, presented themselves before the Lord, and Satan came also among them. And the Lord said to Satan, Whence comest thou? Then Satan answered the Lord and said, From going to and fro in the earth, and from walking up and down in it. And the Lord said unto Satan, Hast thou considered my servant Job, that there is none like him in the earth, a perfect and upright man, one that feared God and eschewed evil.
Okay. Now let me tell you how this used to work. How does God describe Job? Well, he read 8 verses there, and that's a pretty good reading within itself. But this is the total description of how God described Job. But now, I want you to pick something out that you can remember. And this goes back to the way I was talking and teaching y'all the other day about something, about how we used to study. Now, I want you to pick something out that you can remember with the question that I've asked, how does God describe Job? Now, to me, I picked out perfect and upright, okay? Tell me something that you picked out after hearing him read. Yes, sir.
He feared God.
He feared God, okay? Something, Brent, what'd you pick out?
Feared God.
Feared God? What about the left-hand side? Michelle, did you pick something out? Perfect and upright. Anybody else have something you picked out different? Anybody picked out something different about Job?
Clearly, after all he listed, he was a wealthy man.
He was, okay, that's good. Alan picked out the wealthy aspect of him. You know, because God had given he'd given the overview of what Job had.
He was concerned about his family, whether they sinned or not.
Yeah, okay. Anything else? There was that's a good one. Back when we were doing it like that, that was one of the I remember there was not another man like him defined in the Bible except for Jesus. You know, there's good people all the way through, but I used to do this way. I mean, I would write down the questions, then I would give the scriptures for the answer, and then I would ask questions about what did you pick out? What did you learn from what we just asked the question? How did God describe Job? Well, y'all have a pretty good look at what God said about Job with the things that you all have said. Now, that to me gives me incentive to remember. You know, people used to say, well, how do you remember this or how do you remember that? If you do it kind of like, this is the old-fashioned way of Bible study. If you do it kind of this way, if somebody talks about Job, somebody says something about Job, then you say, well, hey, the first 8 verses gives a total description of what God thought about Job. Y'all got any thoughts, comments, or questions?
Well, that's right. He tells everything you need to know about Job. But the interesting part to me about all these 8 verses was at the very last of 6, and it says, and Satan came also among them. And
Yeah.
you know, it's rare that you hear of Satan in a form. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I find that interesting. Not to say that Satan is interesting. We know what kind of character he is. That's the best way I can put it. But this is where we get that started.
That's right. Brent?
He was worried about his son sinning, and he prayed for him, and he said that he did this continuously. So that means probably every day he would come and pray for his sons that they were doing right by God.
That's exactly right. You know, me, back when we were doing it this way a long time ago, it's kind of the way Grandpa used to teach us, and we had to try to remember certain things. And one of the things that's just always jumped out at me, you know, in verse number 5, he said, it was so when the days of their feasting were gone about that Job sent and sanctified them and rose up early in the morning and offered burnt offerings according to the number of them all. So the way he felt about his family and what he was doing, you know, he was making sure that they were godly people. You know, that's what Job was doing. He was leading his family. And he was, not only was he a perfect and an upright man, but he was leading his family, and he was teaching his family. And when you think about that, they offered burnt offerings according to the number of them all. And Job said, it may be that my sons have sinned and cursed God in their hearts. So what he's doing is, he's kind of thinking, you know, I got to get my children on board here, but I got to also make amends with God in case something has gone wrong, you know, in case they've sinned. You know, those kind of things is things that I think about. Now, all right, let's go on. I'm going to try to run through some of this. Now, in the next question is, what does God forbid Satan to do concerning Job? And if you want to look at your answer, go to verse number 12, and I'll go all the way over to Gary Bragg. Verse number 12, Gary, the question is, what does God forbid Satan concerning Job?
Chapter 1 and 12?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And the Lord said unto Satan, behold, all that he has is in thy power. Only upon himself put not forth thy hand. So Satan went forth from the presence of the Lord.
Okay, now, the number one thing with this one, back years ago, and Grandpa said, you got to think, who has the most power? You know, who has the most power? Okay, and you know, I wouldn't have pulled that out. I wouldn't have thought of that. But, you know, what it does is give us an understanding. The Lord said to Satan, you got him. You can do everything you want to him, but don't you kill him. You know, don't put forth from the present, put forth thine hand, he said, but he said, you don't do anything else. Now, the next question that we're going to, what was Satan doing that God questioned him first about? Now, if you want to find your answer here, what was Satan doing that God questioned him first about was in chapter 1. This will be verse number 7. This is an answer that you're going to get from that. What was Satan doing that God really questioned him first about? Pam up front.
The Lord said unto Satan, whence comest thou? And Satan answered the Lord and said, from going to and fro in the earth, and from walking up and down it.
Okay. So the answer to the question is, he said he's been walking up and down in the earth. And the Lord was, you know, or the question was, what was Satan doing that God questioned him first about? And he questioned him first about the fact, he says, what are you doing? He says, Satan answered and said, from going to and fro in the earth, from walking up and down in it. Now you can kind of pull something out of that. What do you suppose he's going up and down in the earth doing? What's he, yes.
1 Peter 5 verse 8 tells the same thing. Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, walks about like a roaring lion, seeking who he may devour.
Okay. Right, and you're right too. Looking for somebody that he can cause problems with. Now, somebody, yes, sir.
When God told Satan not to hurt Job, does that mean that Satan sometimes does hurt people?
I think so. And really and truly, I think what the incentive was, God gave him the ability to do all these things to him, but he couldn't kill him. Now, that's something that we need to think about. You know, could the devil actually cause death or bring death to a person? You know, and that carries you to a place in life where if we live our lives as best we can in a godly manner, and for some reason or another our life is taken from us. And you know, some people's lives are taken innocently. I mean, people walk in to rob a store or something and just shoot a person and kill them dead, you know. And they didn't do anything, you know, but their life was taken. So what this does is kind of motivate and put us into a situation where, hey, you need to be ready at any given time of the fact that anything can happen, you know. It's kind of like the other day I got a call from a lady that lives a way off, and she said that her sister-in-law had gotten killed in a car wreck. and she wanted to prayer with her. And she said, nobody ever thought in a million years this was going to happen. And you know, it's the same way with those little girls up there above the house, you know, that the log truck ran over last year. That boy's mind is gone now. And he doesn't drive or anything anymore. He doesn't go out of the house or anything. And, you know, you think about these things and all, but this is the devil right here. He's saying, hey, you know, it's a possibility. Okay. Now, question number 4. We know what God said he could do to him, and we know what actually has happened over the course of time if you've ever studied the book of Job. But question number 4 was, what was Job's response after he had lost, after losing all? Aunt Burley, if you want to, you can read the answer to that question in chapter 1, verse 20 and 21.
Then Job arose, tore his robe, and shaved his head, and he fell to the ground and worshipped. And he said, naked I came from my mother's womb, naked shall I return there. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord.
Okay, that's one of the most unusual thoughts to think about. As we study this and we ask these questions and get these answers, and the answers are coming straight from the Bible, his response after losing everything that he had. We know what the devil did. You know, you go back and look, and you can look at all of what he had the day when his sons and daughters were eating and drinking in their eldest brother's house, and all of it's been taken away. And now you find the answer to this question. What was his response? And Burley read it there. Naked came I out of my mother's womb, naked shall I return. The Lord gave, the Lord hath taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. And, you know, when you think about that, verse 21, how would you respond? I mean, you know, that Job gives us a lesson. In all of this, Job sinned not, nor did he charge God foolishly. And, you know, I wonder how many of us have asked God or said something like this, why, God? You know, I've done that. I've asked that question a lot of times. Why, God? You know, I know we're not supposed to question God, but, you know, as a human being, sometimes we do that. We say, God, why? You got to wonder. Everybody, like all the people that I have done funerals for and stuff like that, a lot of times people come to me and they say, I don't understand. Why would God do this? Why would God do this? You know, and this is a response for Job that teaches us a lesson. You know, everything he had's gone, but he charged God not foolishly. You know, he didn't blame it on God. He didn't cause God. He didn't turn against God for all this. Any thoughts or comments about that? All right, we'll go. Now, did God see a cause to punish Job, and who did he blame? Now, if we're going to ask that question, we've got to go to chapter 2, verse number 3. Now, let's go back to the question now. Did God see a cause to punish Job, and who did he blame? Now, if we're going to get our answer, we're going to go to chapter 2, verse number 3. And we'll go to Gary Bragg. Chapter 2, verse number 3.
2 and 3?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And the Lord said unto Satan, Hast thou considered my servant Job, that there is none like him in the earth, a perfect and upright man, one that feareth God, and escheweth evil, and still he holdeth fast his integrity. O thou movest me against him, to destroy him without cause.
Now, look at your question. Did God see a cause to punish? Was there any reason to punish Job? And who did he blame? And Gary read it just straight out of the book, you know. He said, my servant Job. He said, there's not another one like him. He said, he's a perfect man. He's an upright man. He fears God. He eschews evil. And he will hold fast his integrity. Now, I think more than anything, when you learn the lessons of what Job taught us, you know, Job never gave in. You know, with all of what God did to him, I mean, what God let the devil do to him, he never gave in, you know. Now, he hurt. And, you know, there's a lot of things you've got to think about. You know, Job, the book of Job, and I did a lot of the books this way. You know, long years ago, I'd take a book and go in and write the questions and then get the answers. And it's amazing to me that God, you know, he knew Job was the one. Have you considered my servant Job? The old devil's looking, he's going up and down looking for somebody, you know. And he said, if you considered my servant Job, there's not another one like him. And I don't think there's ever been one like him since, you know. And he makes it very plain. He said he holds fast his integrity. And even though you have caused me to move against him to destroy him without cause. Somebody asked me this question. Was it actually the devil that was doing these things to him, or was it God doing these things? You know, it's obvious. You know, God allowed him to do these things, you know. But God...
No, that was a question I was sitting here thinking about. Because it said in verse 16, while he yet spake, there came another and said, the fire of God is fallen from heaven, and hath burned up the sheep and the servants and consumed them, and only like the fire of God. Mm-hmm. So why did he describe it as the fire of God instead of the fire of Satan if God wasn't? I don't know. Noticed that before.
Yeah, and I thought about that a lot of times, that question that I just posed there, you know. He gives emphasis about the devil doing the stuff, but God allowed this. And, you know, and somebody said, well, God deserved as much blame as the devil did. But really and truly, you know, God said he's testing. He's giving the devil the test. He said, if you consider my servant Job, he's not going to go down. He won't quit. You know, he's going to keep his integrity intact. But that's a point.
When you look at that, it's the one survivor that survived. It came from heaven, so I think a possibility is you see it from heaven. Well, Satan was up in heaven.
Oh, he
with
was.
God when, you know, God asked him, what have you been doing? So maybe Satan was up there, and even though it was Satan that put the fire, because it came from heaven, this individual said the fire of God came down. Because they were just thinking, it's God, you know, but
That's a
it
good
was probably Satan up there doing it.
That's a good point.
Because he said in verse 11, he said, if you'll put your, said, put forth thy hand now and touch him, that he touch all that he hath, he will curse in your face. So the devil's trying to get God to, do something.
Yeah, he's up there with that. I think it's an interaction right there with God and Satan the whole time.
Okay.
And Satan's doing these things, and God is watching him do it, make sure. Because in the very beginning, when he says, "But don't lay a hand on him," so what would keep Satan from laying a hand on him?
It would have to be God.
No, but what would keep him from doing it? Why would he not do it?
Because he's afraid of God.
He's afraid of God, and God's allowing Satan. He's allowed Satan to roam because he gives us free will.
Yeah.
But if he had done something to Job and laid a hand on him, don't you think God would have probably done away with Satan?
Not have done away with him, but he'd have regretted it.
Exactly.
He would have put him in the bottomless pit.
That's right. And I think too, Brother Box, Brother Charles told me one time, he said, don't ever think that the devil doesn't still walk about, among. He said, don't ever get to the point where you don't realize the devil's still doing the same thing he did from the very beginning when he did this with Job. And this is what Bible study used to be about, y'all. I mean, when you really get down to the bare bones and you pull it out and you talk about it, and that's what it's about. Brent, you had something you want?
Yeah, I was thinking, there ain't no answer to this, but, what made what made Satan think he could tempt Jesus Christ, the Son of God, into sinning and talking bad about God when he couldn't even get Job to do it? You know?
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's a point. I mean, that's a point to think about. I mean, it really is.
One other thing, when he says that I've been going to and fro and up and down, that, I believe that was Satan. He had been on earth, or, you know.
He was cast out into the earth.
But he was causing people to fall away from God. That's what he was doing when he's going to and fro and up and down.
Oh, I agree with you. You know, when he was cast out, the devil and his angels, you know where he was cast out to? Everybody knows where he's cast out to, the earth. You know, this is good, y'all. I really enjoy this. Now, could Satan take Job's life? Now look at verse number 6. This is a question. Here's the answer. Marilyn, would you want to get that one, verse 6?
Then said his wife unto him, Dost thou still retain thy integrity? Curse God and die.
No, verse number 6 of chapter 2.
Oh, okay. And the Lord said unto Satan, Behold, he is in thine hand, but save his life.
Okay. Now the question was, could Satan take Job's life? Now, you got to think about what the question is. Could he take his life? He could have killed him. But God said, but don't do it. God said, don't do it. So when you write the questions, you know, you have to think, you know, a lot of times how the questions are put together. Could Satan take Job's life? That's the question. He must have could have taken his life, or God wouldn't have said.
We were talking about that a while ago. If he could have taken Job's life, he can take anybody's life however he wants to.
That's right. But, you know, and the question was, could he have taken Job's life? And the answer was, the Lord said unto Satan, Behold, he's in your hand, but save his life. Now, the question was, could he have taken his life? Yes. But God said, you don't do that. You know. And so that's what Bible study, you really think about it, act on it, and pull it out the way it needs to be. The next question, what was Job's reaction to his suffering? Now, if you go to chapter 3 and verse 11, turn over there to chapter 3 and verse 11. Now, the question was here, what was Job's reaction to his suffering? Now, let's see if we can get an answer to that. Sandra, you want to read that? Oh, okay. All right. Jan, you want to read it?
3:11.
Yes.
Why died I not from the womb? Why did I not give up the ghost when I came out of the belly?
Yep. See, think about the question now. What was Job's reaction to his suffering? He's saying, why in the world? Why didn't I die? Yeah, I mean, he knows it. Why died I not from the womb? He said, why didn't I, and when did I die? When I was born. Why did I not give up the ghost when I came out of the belly? Well, the question was, what was his reaction? The much suffering was so bad, he said, I wished I'd have died when I was born. You know, and you got to think, this is a really good point to make here. What was the reaction of Job's wife to his suffering? Now, we're talking about his suffering, and if you go to chapter 2 and verse number 9, chapter 2, verse number 9, Judy, you want to read that, verse 9?
Then said his wife unto him, Dost thou still retain thine integrity? Curse God and die.
Okay. You think about the question here, what was the reaction of Job's wife to his suffering? she saw him suffering. She saw what was going on with him, and she said, why don't you just go ahead and curse God and die and get it over with, you know. I've thought about this a lot of times years ago when we were studying this and stuff. You know, a lot of times there wasn't much thought given to why this was having to happen. You know, she had to think, what in the world's happening? You know, but go ahead and curse God and die. Get it over with, you know. I mean, how in the world are you going to manage this?
Everybody thought Job had done something. They thought he had sinned in some way to have all of this attached to his place.
Even Job himself, eventually at the end of all of this, or getting close to the end, he begins to think, you know, what in the world, you know. And he begins to think, maybe looking at himself, you know. But it's a lot to think about.
Jerry,
Yes, sir.
Job, being in such pain and everything, he probably knew his wife was right. He could curse God, but he would die, and he'd be in worse shape than he was
Yeah.
before he died.
Yeah. All right, the next question is, what advice does Eliphaz give Job about his suffering? Now, Eliphaz, of course, is one of the ones that came. Let's go and see if we can get the answer to this question. In chapter 5, we're going to look at verse number 8. Now, let's see, I may have written that one down wrong. I don't think I did, but let me look right here. Eliphaz gives Job about his suffering, and the question is chapter 5 and verse number 8. Ike, I hadn't gone with you in a while. Read verse number 8 of chapter 5.
But as for me, I would seek God, and to God I will commit my cause.
Okay, and read verse 9 to go with it too.
Who does great things, unsearchable, marvelous things without number.
Okay. So Eliphaz said, I would seek unto God. That was what his advice to him was. You know, he's one of the ones that came and they saw the condition of Job, and we see how it was. And he said, well, what advice does Eliphaz give? What did he say? He said, I would seek God. I would turn to God. See if I could get. I would seek unto God, and unto God I would commit my cause. In other words, I'd turn all this over to God and see if he could straighten this out. Of course, Eliphaz didn't know what was happening. You know, I mean, he's just like everybody else. He's come, he sees all the suffering of Job, and he says, you know, this is what I would do. I would turn it over to God. You know, I'd go to God with it. You know, he didn't know that this was a test that God was giving through that of Satan. The next question is, what statement did Job make about man's days? Now, if you want to look at this one, chapter 14, verse 1. Chapter 14, verse 1. Sandy Goodwin, chapter 14, verse 1.
Man that is born of a woman is a few days and full of trouble.
Okay. The question was, what statement did Job make about man's days? And you answered that. He says man's days, you know, when you look at 14 and verse 1, he says man is born of woman in a few days and full of trouble. You know, so we answered the question that way. I kind of believe it's still that way, y'all. Y'all think that? I mean, you know, man's days is few and full of trouble. I don't know too many people that don't go through life without some problems. You know, being in the ministry has taught me a consistent, it's not many weeks goes by that somebody don't call me and tell me about problems that people face. And, you know, I don't always have the answers to help them. I don't always know what to do and how to react to some of the things that people tell me from time to time. Recently, I got a call about a marriage that was breaking apart, They wanted my advice, and and you don't really know sometimes what to say and how to say. But in this question, what was the statement did Job make about man's days? He just flat out said, and you see what kind of condition he's in, man's days is full of trouble. So there's going to be problems, And we could take a lot from this kind of a study to think about how it was and how it is today.
Chapter 7, 9, and 10 gives a little more information.
Read it, Gary.
Chapter 7, 9, and 10. As the cloud is consumed and vanished away, so he that goeth down to the grave shall come up no more. He shall return no more to his house, neither shall his place know him any more.
Okay.
That's how final.
That's the final aspect of it all. Now, the next question was, how many friends came to console Job? If you want to look at the answer to this was to be chapter 2, verse number 11. Pam? No, chapter 2, verse 11.
Now when Job's three friends heard of all his evil that was come upon him, they came every one from his own place. Eliphaz,
The Timnite.
and Bildad, the Shunite, and Zophar, and the Naaman. For they had made an appointment together to come to mourn with him and to comfort him.
Okay. Now think about how many friends came to console him. 3. It told each one of those, the ones that came to console him. Eliphaz the Timnite, Bildad the Shuhite, Zophar the Naamathite. Now, I thought this to be interesting when you look at it. I wrote down another question about it. But when he said right here, they had made an appointment together to come and mourn with him and to comfort him. They had decided to pool their resources. They coming together to mourn with him and to console him, And somebody said that's the definition of a friend, They had decided to come and they wanted to console him. They wanted to do whatever they could for him. They knew the situation. Of course, we know now what happens when they get there, and all of that. But those 3 friends, it made a difference. Now,
This may be one of your next ones.
What they did when they got there was always fascinated me. That they sat down with him on the ground for 7 days and 7 nights, and none spake a word.
and I think was in had been so. You hear what Alan said? They sat down there 7 days and 7 nights, never said a word on the ground. Yeah, but I think the condition that they saw Job in was almost to the point where they couldn't do anything. They just couldn't. There wasn't nothing they could do to think about it. Yeah, I've seen things before in life. It was a terrible thing that happened when I was working. 2 boys burned to death on a bad fire that I was on. And I remember we stayed there until one family member came. One boy was 25, the other boy was 20. And they had burned to death. They'd got in front of a bad. I was on the top end of the fire, and they had never been in that part of the world. They were Flatlanders. They were from Montgomery. And I remember when that boy the first one that got there, when they hadn't moved their bodies or anything, was Uncle. And he just came and he looked and he just sat down. And he began to weep. He never said a word, It's horrifying. And I kind of believe, just like Alan said, they sat down there. It was horrifying to them to see Job in the situation they were in. And so they never spake a word. You know, they just sit down on the ground, and it was amazing.
You know, there's been times I know in my life where I've been in a situation where I didn't want people to say stuff to me, but having people near me that I knew loved me comforted me. And I think that's what these guys were doing. I don't think they felt like they had to say anything, but they were there, and I believe that they felt, and so did Job, they felt some kind of bond, and that's all it took to try to get Job to, you know, make it through that time.
I think you're right. People would think this to be a little bit unusual, but I've been places before and had to go when something happened bad and somebody lost their life, and I was at a loss for words. I thought about, you know, what can you say? I mean, you know, when somebody loses a child, you know, what can you say? I mean, there's nothing you can say to console or help or do anything. And that may go back to what Alan was talking about. They probably, like you said, Bobby, they probably thought maybe just their presence, that was enough, because there was nothing to say in his situation. Y'all like doing this? I mean, this is old-timey way I used to do it. Okay. Bobby's already answered the next question. How long many days were the days that none spake? Let's go to the next one. How does Job describe his comforters? This will be number 13. This will be question 13. This will be chapter 16 and verse 1. This is how he describes his comforters. We just talked about that. 16:1. Let's see. Linda in the back.
Then Job answered and said, I have heard many such things. Miserable comforters are you all.
Okay. He says, I have heard many such things. Miserable comforters are you all. You know, so that was his words to describe the comforters.
This was after the 7-day period when they actually started talking to him.
That's right.
And all of the things that they were saying and trying to comfort him, and he was like, yeah, you the
Not a lot
worst.
you about this.
You guys are the worst. Listening to you, because I mean, they were saying, you know, you've done something.
Yeah.
You know.
Oh. That was it. You know, they had to be thinking the whole time. You know, when you look back and you start reading this and studying it and making a lesson out of it, they had to be thinking something went wrong here. This wouldn't be happening. You know, I mean, that's the human side. Okay, what did Job declare concerning his righteousness? This is number 14. This will be chapter 27. If you'll go all the way over to chapter 27, I tried to cover the whole book. Chapter 27, verse number 6. Let's see. Lamar? Okay.
27 verse 6.
Yes, sir. And this is what did Job declare concerning his righteousness?
My righteousness I hold fast, and will not let it go. My heart shall not reproach me so long as I live.
Okay, so Job, in this particular verse, he says, my righteousness. I mean, he knows himself. I hold fast. You know, he's already been encouraged to curse God and die. You know, get over it. You know, get out of the way. But he said, my righteousness I hold fast, and I'm not going to let it go. My heart shall not reproach me so long as I live. So, you know, Job's going to stand the test of time. And he's going to make it. And, you know, he realizes where he's at and what's going on with it. What chapter describes Job's look back to better times? This would be number 15. This is one of my favorite. The whole chapter of 29, if y'all don't mind, I'll read it to you. It give the whole thing. chapter 29. Now, remember what the question is. What chapter describes Job's look back to better times? Now, listen to what verse 29 says. I read fast, but moreover, Job continued his parable and said, "Oh, that I were in months past, as in the days when God preserved me, when his candle shined upon my head, and when by his light I walked through darkness. And I was in the days of my youth, when the secret of God was upon my tabernacle, when the Almighty was yet with me, and my children were about me. When I would wash my steps with butter and rock, poured me out of rivers of oil. When I went out to the gate through the city, when I prepared my seat in the street, the young men saw me and hid themselves, and the aged rose and stood up. The princes refrained talking and laid their hands on their mouth, and the nobles held their peace, and their tongue cleaved to the roof of their mouth. When the ear heard me, when it blessed me, and when the eye saw me, it gave witness to me, because I delivered the poor that cried, and the fatherless, and him that I had none to help him. The blessings of him that was ready to perish came upon me, and I caused the widow's heart to sing for joy, and I put on righteousness, and it clothed me. My judgment was as a robe and a diadem. I was eyes to the blind and feet to the lame. I was a father to the poor, and cause which I knew not I searched out, and I break the jaws of the wicked, and pluck the spoil out of his teeth. And then I said, I shall die in my nest, and I shall multiply my days as the sand. My root was spread out by the waters, and dew lay all night upon my branch. My glory was fresh in me, my vow was renewed in my hand. Unto me gave ear, and waited, and kept silence at my counsel. After my words they spake not again, and my speech dropped upon them, and they waited for me as for rain. They opened their mouth wide as for the latter rain, and I laughed on them. They believed not. In the light of my countenance they cast not down. I chose out their way, and sat chief, and dwelt as a king in the army, as one that comforted the mourners. Now, whole chapter 29, the question was, what did Job declare concerning his righteousness? He just went through a battery of things that he was about, and what he did, and the kind of man that he was, and all the things that he had done over the course of time. You know, when you think about that, he said, I was eyes to the blind, I was a feet to the lame. You know, Job knows he really and truly knows that he hadn't done anything that he knew of that would cause all this. And so he brings it to the point of saying, hey, I did all these things and I don't understand, you know. But now, what chapter describes Job's look back at better times? We just read that. Now, what eventually happened between Job and his three friends? Now, this is, if you want to see what's happened between Job and his three friends, chapter 32, I think, in verse 3, I think, if I didn't write it down wrong. Okay. Chapter 32, verse number 3. Let's see, who hadn't read? Emmy, you hadn't read.
Also against the three kings was his wrath kindled, because they had found no answer, and yet had condemned Job.
Okay, what do you think about his friends? Against his three friends was his wrath kindled, you know, because they had found no answer and yet had condemned Job. In other words, it's kind of like what Bobby was saying a while ago. You know, he figured out he had to have done something or this wouldn't be happening, you know. And so his wrath was kindled against his friends. So in answer to that question, what eventually happened between Job and his three friends? It's amazing to me of all the things that Job went through and still retained his integrity. Verse number, we'll go ahead and get down to the end here. Question 20, what does God instruct Job's friends to do in the end and why? What does God eventually, since our time is running down, what does God instruct Job's friends to do in the end and why? And if you go find your answer to that, you go to chapter 42. This will be verses number 7 through 10. Chapter 42, 7 through 10. Let's see, somebody want to volunteer on that? Let's see, did I get, Aunt Bertie, have I called on you tonight?
You have.
Okay, is anybody that I hadn't called on? Alan, you read some.
Me.
Brent, okay.
42 what?
All right, if you, 42, 7 through 10. Yeah, Brent, that'd be good.
And it was so that after the Lord had spoken these words unto Job, the Lord said to Eliphaz the Temanite, My wrath is kindled against thee and against thy two friends, for ye have not spoken of me the thing that is right, as my servant Job hath. Therefore take unto you now 7 bullocks and 7 rams, and go to my servant Job, and offer up for yourself a burnt offering. And my servant Job will pray for you. For him will I accept, lest I deal with you after your folly, in that you have not spoken to me the thing which is right, like my servant Job. So Eliphaz the Temanite and Bildad the Shuhite and Zophar the Naamanite went and did according to the Lord, commanding them. The Lord also accepted Job.
Okay. You think about the question now, what does God instruct Job's friends to do in the end? Think about the Lord turned to the captivity of Job and prayed for his friends when he prayed for his friends. But notice what he was reading there about these three. You know, God pretty much put them in their place, you know. And he you know, Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad, and Zophar, he said the Lord accepted Job. They didn't really and truly, you know, they didn't know what was going on. I hate to defend this, but at the same time, they had no idea what was happening. They thought all the way through, if you read and study that, they thought Job had to have done something. I mean, he had to messed up somewhere, or this wouldn't be happening, you know. But it's kind of like what Alan said previous, you know, when they came, they saw the situation, they sat down on the ground, you know, and just sat there with him. And, you know, but it's almost a given when you think about how this turned out, you know. And there's a lot of other things. I'm doing one on Jesus right now. I'm doing a study like this on Jesus. I'm asking the questions, and then I'll give you the answers. And we're going to study about something that happened with Jesus in his life before he got down to the crucifixion. It's almost, you know, when you can answer these questions and you can look at this, to me, it gives a little sense of, well, you know, you gain some knowledge about some of the things. Have you thought much about this? And, you know, studied about Job, you know, and all the problems that people have today, they never think about solving their problems with God. You know, a lot of people, you know, they get in trouble, but they never think about God in the whole situation. Our time's up. We got 4 minutes, so I give time to get the kids in.
Didn't tell what really happened. Job said in verse 10, and the Lord gave Job twice.
That's exactly right, Al. He gave him twice as much as he had before. He's already doing pretty good, that's right. Is y'all okay with that tonight?
Oh, yeah. 461.
That was Joshua. Think about what the book said, I never once seen the righteous forsaken nor his seed begging bread. You think about that thought, you know, it makes you want to do what's right, you know. And you read back and study some of these things that went on, you know. Some people never get they don't never take the hint, you know. I got a friend right now, I wish he'd change his life, but he's just never gonna do it. Apparently, I wished he would, but. What number did you say, Dwayne?
461.
461.
Tim was said all of them.
461, if there's anyone that needs to respond to the invitation of the gospel, please do so right now. All together, we're standing now, we're singing 461.
Let's sing all three verses. Got it? Let's sing. There's a great day coming, a great day coming, there's a great day coming by and by, when the saints and the sinners shall be parted right in there. Are you ready for that day to come? Are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready for the judgment day? Are you ready? Are you ready for the judgment day? There's a bright day coming, a bright day coming, there's a bright day coming by and by. But its brightness shall only come to them that love the Lord. Are you ready for that day to come? Are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready for the judgment day? Are you ready? Are you ready for the judgment day? There's a sad day coming, a sad day coming, there's a sad day coming by and by, when the sinner shall weary to depart, I know you not. Are you ready for that day to come? Are you ready? Are you ready?